to be given to ministries to implement specifically a type of scheme. Second is core, where once the funds have been given for core, then you can give it for core. For funds have been given for core of core, then you give it for core. And third is optional, and in case of an optional, last priority, where this has to be given in a certain amount. Now, if you look at this carefully, let's understand this. You will see a box at the bottom of the slide. This is about special rates. So this 75 is to 25, this 60 is to 40, this 50 is to 50 works for usual states which are ordinary in nature, which do not have any special constraints for them. You will have special rates for states which are either in the hilly parts of the country, or for that matter, the northeastern part of the country. Even union territories and union territories with or without state legislative assemblies also get special rates. Now, let me be very clear on this. You don't need to know these special rates for special areas. Nobody is going to ask you this in the pre. So you just have to look at what are the broad kinds, what is the broad funding pattern, and what are the different examples of the same. Specific technical rates for technical schemes do not have to be done. That is why I'm not giving you this information, because it is irrelevant for the exam. So let's sum it up. Three kinds of schemes. First, core of core. Second, core. And third, optional. Core of core, top priority. Before money is given to any other ministry in the consolidated fund, the ministries have to first spend the money on core, and then optional. Are we clear on this? When we look at core of core, these are top priority, then core, and then optional. From here, we now move to the next part. I'll just look at if there are any specific doubts that I need to answer. Yes. So example of core schemes would be, for example, the Prime Minister's Mudra Yojana is also an example of core of core. When we look at LPG households that have to be given, those are also core on core. One second, let me just go through some doubts also. One second. There are a total of 30 centrally sponsored schemes, which means a total of 30 centrally sponsored schemes. This includes everything from core to core of core and optional. All of these three combined are a total of 30. Now, is the contribution from states final and exactive? That depends on negotiations between the center and the state. Are core mandatory on the state to implement? If the states have taken the funds, if the subject of the scheme is in the union list, then yes, the states have to do this. If it's in the state list, then you can't, or you don't have to. For example, health is in the state list. We've discussed this repeatedly. Health is in the state list. So Ayushman Bharat, which happens to be a health insurance program, the states can happily reject to do so. For example, in the case of Orissa and Delhi, they has decided to not do this. Okay. If the states do not want to implement core of core or core schemes, and they've taken the money for it, and this can call for action against the states. This would also mean enough grounds for breakdown of constitution machinery, if not. Ayushman Bharat is core because it is second priority in funding. For general purposes of Ayushman Bharat, it is 60s to 40 that has been decided by the center. It is a health insurance scheme. The states can decide not to do this because, very simply, health is in the state list. Swachh Bharat is in core and not core of the core, because Swachh Bharat is dominantly an awareness generation scheme. It is important, but there are larger issues that we are worrying about. All right. Now we'll move on. There are some additional terms that you need to know that you would possibly come across in and around your study of the schemes. First, what is a mission mode? Mission mode is basically any scheme. A scheme will have multiple deadlines, will have multiple targets. For example, Swachh Bharat would have, let's make India open defecation free by X amount of date, or construct X number of toilets by X amount of states, by X amount of dates. Now, how does this work? Um, any specific deadline, any specific target which is given in a specific context of a scheme, and the target has a deadline, then that deadline becomes a mission mode. So, for example, construction of toilets under Swachh Bharat is mission mode. Making India open defecation free is also mission mode. Yes, Savia TB program is also on mission mode. Right. Flagship, as we've known very clearly, any scheme which receives the highest or relatively the largest budgetary allocation from the ministry. So in the budget, money is taken out from the CFI, it's given to the ministries, and the ministries are then allocating it to multiple schemes for development. In such a case, what usually happens is the scheme that receives the largest amount of funds happens to also be a flagship scheme. Third, umbrella. So umbrella is when you have related schemes, they're essentially doing the same thing. You club them and you put them under a larger scheme called an umbrella scheme. We've done this exhaustively before also. The Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is a classic example of an umbrella scheme, where that is your only scheme for school education, and all parts of school education are now under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, right? Which includes Sarva Shiksha, and which also includes teacher training and the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Fourthly, convergence. What can happen often is that two schemes might be solving a similar problem. If they are solving a similar problem, or they can help each other out, in such a case, you can merge them, you can use them to help any of these in a larger context. So, for example, in Swachh Bharat, we need to construct toilets. Now, if we need to construct toilets, we need manpower. Now, we have a manpower generation scheme, we have an employment scheme called MG Nareka. So, you can hire workers under MG Nareka, guarantee them X number of days of work, and after guaranteeing them X number of days of work, you can make sure that the workers under MG Nareka are now constructing toilets for Swachh Bharat, right? So this is how it works. I'll revise this again. I'll give you an explanation again, Shri, don't worry. So four kinds of terms you need to know. One, a mission mode. A mission mode is where specific targets of a scheme have been specifically mentioned. For example, the scheme is Swachh Bharat, and we are saying to construct toilets. So constructing X number of toilets, or X number of sanitary facilities, that is mission mode. Providing electricity to X number of villages, that is mission mode on a specific date. Second, flagship. Flagship is when whichever scheme of the ministry has received the highest amount of funds from the ministry is called a flagship scheme. So, for example, Samagra Shiksha is flagship for education. Third, umbrella. If there are multiple schemes largely doing the same thing, you could merge them together. They're in the same sector, they're relating to either the same thing or different parts of the same sector. You can put them together and you can club them into a larger organizational category called umbrella. Again, Samagra Shiksha is an umbrella scheme also, which basically means all your schemes around school education, which includes Sarva Shiksha, which also includes teacher education and Rashtriya Madhyamik, they've all been merged into a larger scheme called Samagra Shiksha. I'll explain convergence once again. So, convergence means if schemes can help each other out, no matter what the scheme is, You can work together, you can make them work for each other, you can take the benefits of one and use it for the other. Classic example I gave you is you can use MG Narega workers to construct, let us say, toilets for Swachh Bharat. Now, when something like this happens, if the states can be involved in all of these, then there is absolutely no problem. If the states can freely implement all of these, you don't have to ask the states, you can really just work it out as a larger idea. But if it is essentially in the state list, then you might have to sit with them and negotiate with them. Now, just hold on a second. I'll take a couple of doubts so that I can understand what is the question. Ankit, just hold on a second. I am going to look at some specific questions first. What is the relation or difference between flagship and umbrella scheme? A flagship scheme can be an umbrella scheme. There's absolutely no problem with that. A flagship scheme is the one which receives the highest amount of money. Umbrella is a scheme which has multiple schemes under it. So no problem at all. Okay. Funding is done on a state by state basis, right? All right. That should be enough. Let's move to the core parts. This is very important. You must know how this has to be done. We've identified a total of 6 core sectors for the upcoming 2020. Please listen to this carefully. Let me first go through this and then we will look at a specific number of doubts. Okay. We've identified 6 core sectors which are largely important for the exam in 2020. They are education, health, entrepreneurship, agriculture, rural development, and women and child development. These are core 6 sectors. We really think if there has to be a scheme, it will be from one of these six sectors because of multiple reasons. These are broad patterns that you need to know. First, if it is a flagship umbrella or a larger scheme, like a big scheme, technical details could be asked, such as how many days of work under MG Narega, or what is the entitlement for EWS under RTE. But if it is a recently launched scheme, a very specific scheme, let us say giving electricity to households or giving LPG connections to households, then broadly what is the scheme trying to do is what is needed. I'll repeat this again. Specific funding ratios between the center and the states and financial allocations are generally not asked. You will not be asked how much is the center paying, how much is the states paying, what are special category rates, how much are the hilly states paying, or how much are the northeastern states paying. You don't need to know this. Very importantly, the chances of schemes being repeated are none, are almost next to zero, or very limited to be on the safer statistical side. In the last 5 years, not a single scheme has ever been repeated in the papers. We've gone through all the questions in a lot of detail. Schemes which are fully and only funded by the states are not asked. And second, optional schemes where the states can opt out and the states can decide to not do this, those are also not asked in the exam. So what do you really need to know? You really need to know central sector schemes, core of core, and core. That's it. That's all you need to know as far as 2020 pre is concerned. Not a word more, not a word less. Now we've got the patterns right. Let's continue. Let's start with the first, education and MHRD. This is the most important sector for today. So there are two larger ideas: school education and higher education. In school education, it's the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. It is centrally sponsored, which means 60% is paid by the center and 40 by the states. This works on a case by case basis. Okay. Now, let's look at this. Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is a flagship scheme, which means the Education Ministry's highest funding comes to Samagra Shiksha. It is an umbrella scheme, which means it covers multiple schemes as well. So it covers the following: Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which is the scheme for right to education, which covers 6 to 14 years of age. If a child wants to go to school and the child is between 6 to 14 years of age, the child can happily go to school. The state will guarantee the same. It is applicable to both government and private schools, and private schools have to reserve 25% of their seats based on EWS criteria. Are we clear on this? All right. Um, Second, the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan wants to achieve 100% enrollment in the secondary education level, which is after Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan ends and Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan begins. And all schemes on teacher education have also been merged under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. In 2019, this was recently launched, the National Mission to Improve Learning Outcomes at Elementary Level. This is also called Nishtha. So, Sudeep, it is the government which decides what is core of core and core. As per the government, this is core and this is not core. So, technically, that is exactly how it works. Your opinion could be that this could have been core of core and this not core. This is an analysis that is required for the mains, not for the pre. So, the National Mission to Improve Learning Outcomes at Elementary Level is basically a scheme to train primary school teachers in technology, in better learning outcomes, in teaching well, in correcting student evaluations and homeworks well, and also handling the softer problems that students might face. In school education, this is all you need to know. I don't need you to do anything else apart from this for the prelims and school education. From here, we then look at higher education. In higher education, there have been a couple of developments for one. Okay, yeah. So, in higher education, I can see there are a lot of technical questions on this, and there's a reason I'm not covering them because they will not be asked. When there's a question on private school for aided and unaided, all private schools have RTE. The only place RTE doesn't get applied to are religious schools. That's it. That is it. For everything else, there is an RTE. So don't get confused. Don't get caught up in unnecessary technical details, right? Yes, a Samagra Shiksha is shared between both the center and the states. Okay. Uh, what are the classes in elementary, primary, secondary, senior secondary, and higher education? I'm sure you can figure this out. Just Google it. It's not that difficult. Okay. So higher education. Now, in higher education, there are largely four things that we're looking at. First, the Rashtriya Ujjwala Shiksha Abhiyan. This is basically a centrally sponsored scheme, which means both the center and the states pay for the same. This is a funding scheme, which means the center and the states are going to collectively and jointly fund state education institutions on a project by project basis. This is a grant. This is not a loan. This is a grant. If the states at the state university or the state college needs money for, let us say, better hiring better teachers or better classrooms or an auditorium, or uh, or let us say you need money for let us say building a better playground or a laboratory, you can take the money from the Rashtriya Ujjwala Shiksha Abhiyan. You will not be charged anything for it. um, no extra schemes have to be done. This is the whole point of this. Second, the National Education Alliance for Technology. This has been again in the news in 2019. NEAT is what it stands for, the National Education Alliance for Technology. Now, this is a public-private participation scheme, which means this is the central government, only the central government, inviting suggestions and policy proposals and ideas from ed tech companies. Ed tech companies are companies that work on education and technology related problems. Now, in such a case, you will see a public-private partnership scheme inviting edtech companies to provide artificial intelligence-based solutions for better testing. This basically means we want to build better testing modules for the country. Now, what does this mean? This basically means that, for example, there is the CAT exam. Can we make the CAT exam more customized to the student taking it in terms of adaptive testing, that each student gets the first same question, and depending on the answer to the first question, the next question follows up, testing specific requirements of the child. So it's just an idea, it has just been announced, and that's all you need to know. There has been no substantive process on the same. Absolutely, Rajneesh, it's adaptive testing. Very good, right? Third, the Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission for Teacher Training. This is basically the teacher education version of higher education, when we're looking at training teachers of all universities, center, state, private, any form of university, to become better at what they teach, to become better researchers, to analyze student problems better, everything that makes a better teacher. That's all. You will not be asked the components of this. You just need to know what is it for. It's basically training teachers of all kind of universities and colleges. And lastly, we'll be looking at HEFA. It stands for Higher Education Financing Agency. So the Higher Education Financing Agency is basically, we'll just have a look at it. It is a non-banking finance corporation, which means it's a bank. It's a bank which is going to give specific project loans to central institutions, which means only and only central institutions. It could be a Kendra Vidyalaya, it could be an IIT, it could be a Delhi University, it doesn't matter. So this basically means you can give project specific loans to central institutions, and this is basically a bank, and the MHRD and the Canara Bank collectively have funded this NBFC. That's all that there is. So the Rashtriya Uchtar Shiksha Abhiyan was a grant, and it could be given for any reason that the state governments would want. HEFA is a loan that has to be given for a specific purpose only to central institutions. Uchtar Abhiyan was state, HEFA was center. Uchtar Abhiyan is a grant, HEFA is a specific loan, and that's the fundamental difference. Okay. Now, health again, it's really important. Please don't do anything else as far as the remainder parts are concerned. This should be enough. Okay, next. Ayushman Bharat. Yes. So Ayushman Bharat is the primary scheme which has been in focus right now. Ayushman Bharat is going to be looking at two parts: the Prime Minister's Jan Arogya Yojana and the primary healthcare centers upgradation to health and wellness centers. Both of them are very, very important, are very highly likely to be asked in the pre. Now, all that we're giving you is all that needs to be done as far as the Jan Arogya Yojana and upgradation is concerned. Now, let's have a look at this first. Prime Minister's Jan Arogya Yojana. It's also called the National Health Protection Scheme. It is under Ayushman Bharat. Now, let's get this right. All you need to know are the points that I have mentioned here. First, it's centrally sponsored, 60% paid by the center, 40% paid by the states. It's a health insurance scheme, which means there's going to be a health premium. 60% of the premium will be paid by the center, 40% will be paid by the states. Each family will get a yearly cover of 5 lakhs, and there is no limit on the size of the family, which means just because you don't use your insurance, it doesn't get added up. It's just 5 lakhs per year per family, no matter how big or small the family is. Third, it is only for secondary and tertiary sector hospitalization. This is not used for primary healthcare centers. This is not for specific doctor clinics. It's for secondary and tertiary hospitalization. And a list of government and private hospitals has already been formulated by the government. The families are selected on the basis of a socio-economic caste census, and on the basis of automatic inclusion and exclusion criteria is all that is needed. Okay. Yes. Now, all India. So yes, the criteria for getting insurance. That's exactly what I'm telling you. There is no limit on the number of families who can actually take this. It's an all India cashless and paperless scheme, which basically means first things first. You do not need to have any paperwork with you. You don't need to have any scheme identification card with you. You have to go and get a smart card done and just swipe the smart card at the hospital that you're at, and that's all that is needed. You don't need anything else. The hospital will swipe your smart card and send your claim for processing. It should not be a larger issue. Okay. Next, it does not cover chronic medication, which means if somebody has a BP problem and wants to take BP medication under Ayushman Bharat from the government, that's not going to happen. If you're just going to let us say if you're just going to get a checkup done because you're feeling unwell, you have fever, that's not covered under Ayushman Bharat. You have to be hospitalized. OPD stands for outpatient departments. It's not needed. Okay. What about those identified in the 10 crore family is what this is. The 10 crore families that we talk about are these. So I would recommend that you keep your doubts a little limited because we need to cover this up, and this is fairly simple. There's a reason we're doing this in a crisp manner because you don't need to do this detail than what is asked in the exam. Okay, states can either set up a non-profit trust or outsource a company for the settlement of the claim, which means either the state government can set up a trust, which basically means an organization where the premium money will come, and as and when claims are sent to uh, the non-profit trust, the state can settle those claims. Or you can directly hire a private insurance company who can manage this on your behalf. The decision lies with the states, because though this is a centrally sponsored scheme, it is already in the state list. So you have to take into consideration whatever the states have in terms of their requirements. And to monitor and implement all of this at a larger level, we already have the National Health Authority, who will coordinate between the center and the states and shall make sure that this is implemented rather smoothly. Okay, next. The next part of Ayushman Bharat is upgrading primary healthcare centers to health and wellness centers. What this means, our existing primary healthcare centers are very basic immunization centers and specific and very, very basic reproductive healthcare services and basic healthcare. We want to make them better because you don't have to go to a hospital every time you are sick. The primary healthcare center will listen to. So, the primary objective is to upgrade existing primary healthcare centers, or and add them up and upgrade them into health and wellness centers. This basically means either a new wellness center or upgrade the existing one into a health and wellness center. The only question, Shashank, you will get is, what does the National Health Authority do? It monitors or it implements the Ayushman Bharat program by coordinating between the center and the states. Because Sushant, health is in the state list, the governments can decide not to do this. Next is the primary health authority would, after this, after being upgraded to health and wellness centers, they would cover non-communicable diseases, reproductive healthcare services, and communicable diseases as well. So that's the larger agenda that we intend to do: cover common non-communicable diseases, reproductive healthcare diseases, and communicable diseases as well, which basically means from a blood test to immunization to the delivery of a child to prenatal care to minimally invasive surgical procedures to physiotherapy to mental health treatment. As much of this we'd like to provide at our health and wellness centers. And that's pretty much it. There's one more small scheme which is slightly important, the Prime Minister's Swasthya Suraksha Yojana. It's a central sector scheme. In this, you will only and only have the central government paying for it. The state does not do anything here. The states have no role here, and you'll understand why. Because this scheme largely looks at setting up 20 institutions, out of which six are already functional. For example, in Bhopal, Andhra Pradesh, in Raipur, etc. So this scheme has two parts. First is to set up new aims. Second is to upgrade existing state or central government medical colleges. That's it. There's nothing more. The state is willing to upgrade existing state medical colleges by giving them a super specialty block or a treatment center or a trauma center. You must ask, why does the center only pay for this? Because aims are the central government. The states do not own aims. The central government does. That is why the center is setting up more aims, because the center owns aims. That's pretty much it. There's nothing more you need to know where this is concerned. Entrepreneurship. Uh, the reason you shortlisted this is Kaushal Vikas Yojana has already been asked. National Innovation Mission has already been asked in the last year. We will not touch those schemes again. The only thing which is left is Startup India. It's from the Ministry of Commerce. It's a central sector scheme, which means the center is completely paying for it. It's basically a relief or a tax benefit scheme. If you are a startup registered under this, you can self-attest that you can self-attest by following relevant environment and labor law provisions. You don't need to prove this. It's assumed that you are following environment and labor law provisions. You get a 3 years tax exemption, and you also get incentives, which is basically, if you are raising money or if you're raising investment and you're raising investments on a higher share value than what your fair share value is, you then have to pay a certain amount of angel tax. If you're in total investment is not more than 25 crores, you don't have to pay angel tax. All right. Um, Now, in case finals, no Ayushi technical questions will not be asked, so don't worry. So, in case of failing, going bankrupt, filing for insolvency, or any of those things, in such a case, that a fast track winding up will happen. Second, if a startup is making something innovative, is doing something extraordinarily cutting edge, then the process of getting a patent for the same, and the government will ensure you get an 80% discount uh, in receiving your patents. Varun, the tenure is the eligibility criteria for startups, and that's all you need to know. There's nothing more. MSME, there has not been a major scheme, Shri. I've already added this in the second document. If you will be patient, you'll have a look at that document in some time. Don't worry. Agriculture, very important again. There are the following schemes. First is the Prime Minister's Kisan Yojana. I understand this has been fairly in the news. What can be done is the following things. The Prime Minister's Kisan Yojana, firstly, is also called the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. It's essentially the same thing. So if you get either of those two names, don't get confused. It is a central sector scheme, which basically means all that the center is doing is basically paying money for it. That's nothing more. It's just paying supportive income to the farmers. So a direct payment of 6,000 rupees per year will be given on an installment basis in few months, and the only people who can take this are small or marginal families who collectively own at the most 2 hectares of cultivable land. Just 2 hectares of uh, cultivable land. Now, in the budget, if you remember, this has been put under consideration, and therefore, this is how it has been put into place. Okay. Now, the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Pension Yojana, how the yeah, it covers all. It has been the 2 hectares land has been removed in the budget. This is the original text of the scheme, so don't worry. Okay. Now, the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Pension Yojana is basically for small and marginal farmers, uh, where you will get a 3,000 rupees per month fixed pension. The eligible farmers are in the 18 to 40 years age group, and they can participate in this voluntary or contributory pension scheme. Yeah, it has been removed. That's what I'm telling you. This was originally 2 hectares. Now, in the budget, they have notified this. They intend to implement it this year. Let's see when it gets implemented. Okay, that's all that there is for Pradhan Mantri Kisan Pension Yojana. Now, rural development, again, very, very important. Uh, Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana. Okay, so the Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana, let's look at this. Land holding capacities, technical details have been removed in the budget, so don't worry. There'll be a question on doubling farmers' income? Yes, there would be a question on what are the schemes available to increase enhancement of farmer income, Shashank. Yes. All right. So rural development will largely be looking at the following things. First, the Gram Sadak Yojana. This has been enhanced in terms of budgetary allocation in the budget, therefore is important. It's basically providing connectivity by the way of an all-weather road with necessary culverts and cross-drainage structures, which is operable throughout the year, which basically means building roads in a village, and a road that can be accessed across most times of the year. It basically means wherever there is, so for example, in a plain area with a population of 500 and more, and in a hilly and tribal area with a population of 200 and more, 250 and more. And if that area does not have a road, we'll build a road. That's all that there is and nothing more. Please don't worry about anything else. Yes. Next, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. Now, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana is, though technically for rural development, but it is under the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. I'm doing schemes that can be asked Ujjwal, so please don't ask a question which is counterproductive. So, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana is under the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. It's a central sector scheme, which basically means the center is paying for it. Very simple. You want to safeguard the health of women and children by giving them clean cooking fuel. This is getting basically LPG in different households, an LPG gas connection, so that your traditional chulas are not needed because those are safety concerns, and people can have a health problem. Third is the Saubhagya Yojana. The Saubhagya Yojana is also called the Pradhan Mantri Sahaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana. It's the same thing if they ever ask you in two different ways. It basically is to provide electricity connections in all remaining unelectrified households in rural and urban areas. There's genuinely not more. So any household which does not have an electricity will get one, and that's it. Okay. Now, the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana depends. So there is whether it is central sector or sponsored, it is a centrally sponsored scheme. Okay. Next, the last scheme in rural development. All you need to know in rural development is listen to this very carefully. The Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. This is very, very important. It aims to provide a pakka house with basic amenities to all houseless households and households living in kacha and dilapidated houses by 2022. This comes under the larger dimension for housing for all. It's a direct benefits transfer scheme. And what happens with the direct benefits transfer scheme is you are directly basically giving money to people to basically build their own houses. Now, this converges with Swachh Bharat and MG Narega, which means people can also enroll under MG Narega, work to build their own house, and also get paid for it, and also have incentives under Swachh Bharat. And if you decide to build a toilet in your own house, you may get an additional toilet construction assistance. And because it's an MG Narega convert scheme, you will get wages for constructing your house. Okay, clear. Now, uh, women and child development again has been massively news in December and January. The first is the Bharatiya Poshan Krishi course. Now, the Bharatiya Poshan Krishi course is basically a technologically built scheme. It is a repository of diverse crops across 128 agroclimate zones for better nutritional outcomes. This basically means we're going to have food data or nutrition data based on local conditions of different parts of the country. Okay. Now, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, through its India Research Center and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, will document and evaluate promising regional dietary practices and the messaging around them and develop a food atlas on regional agro food systems, which basically means the technical know-how for this scheme will be given by the Harvard Center of Public Health, and they have a subsidiary organization in India called the India Research Center. It's actually based out of Bombay. It's funded by the Piramal Foundation, and the funding for the same, in addition, will also be coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. What they'll basically do is create a live food nutrition map across the country where people can actually just have a look that district X has the following agricultural outputs, and this is the nutrition that is needed. So food data, of course, food data is basically it's nothing and nothing but a list of this is available in your district, this is what will get you nutrition, this is what will not get you nutrition. Try to arrange for nutrition from what is locally available. That's it. Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, again, very, very important for the purposes of this exam. It's a direct benefit transfer scheme again, and cash benefits are provided to pregnant women in their bank account directly to meet enhanced nutritional needs and partially compensate for wage loss. This is essentially to strengthen pregnant and lactating women so that our maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates reduce, and women don't have to work in tough conditions just because they have been given uh, they're going through childbirth. So pregnant women and lactating mothers will receive a cash benefit of 5,000 in 3 installments. You don't have to worry about the word 3 installments. This should be enough. You don't have to worry about this. On fulfilling respective conditionality, which means you have to register your pregnancy so that you are formally delivering it. Second, an antenatal checkup and the registry of the birth of the child and the completion of the first cycle of vaccination for the first living child of the family, which means you registered for the child, you've gotten the necessary medical checkups done, you have registered the child with the government authority so that relevant documents are available, and you have ensured that the child is vaccinated. You do this, you will receive 5,000 rupees. In addition to this, there's also another scheme called Janani Suraksha Yojana, under which you can make sure that additional benefits are also given in this entire ecosystem. So you get about 1,000 rupees from Janani Suraksha Yojana, you get about 5,000 from here. So in all, a woman would essentially get 6,000 rupees. Clear? So now listen to this carefully. These are your sectors and they have to be done properly. The slides are available on this. In addition to these, there are some additional sectors that are needed, some background basic flagship schemes. I have already put them up. And I've already put them up on the Telegram channel as well so that we can have a look. Those are background schemes, nothing more has happened. So the idea behind this is I've looked at the boxes of the economic survey. I've read the entire economic survey. I've gone through the text of the budget speech in detail. We've gone through all the major schemes that have been launched last year. And we looked at all the major changes that have been added to the major schemes this year. And this is the list that we've created. In addition to this, you would find some about 10 more schemes which are which are very standard format, like for example National Rural Health Mission, National Urban Health Mission. Basic components of those are forever schemes. Those are static content, and I have already given them in the additional document. The link of the Telegram channel is down below. You can have a look. I've already put them right here, so in case you need to. This should be enough. You don't need to do anything else. I'll just put this up here in case you need to. Um, Now, I'll repeat this again. I understand that you'll have a lot of technical details. You're writing the prelims exam, not the mains exam at the moment. Please do not get into more details that we've discussed. If I had to, if I wanted to, I would have gotten into unnecessary and very long discussions on this. You don't need to. Whatever has been done, this is enough. Now, just one part is left, which is the tricks for the prelims exam. Let's listen to this and let's get this right up and about. So, but a simple fund, a very simple way to go about this. Whenever you see a question on a scheme, you will see some keywords. उसमें लिखा होगा all, या लिखा होगा only. Usually क्या होता है? In the case of all and only, the option may or may not be right. So the trick words are all and only, or sometimes even none. So all, only, none, neither. These are blanket terms, which basically means that's all you need to identify whether this option is right or wrong. ठीक है? एक तो ये trick हो गई. The first trick is to make sure that if you find an option with only, or neither, or none, or something like this, just read the option again. Mostly the question would be wrong. The option would be wrong. Second is, sometimes you will not have heard of a scheme, and that is okay, and that's fine. But for example, let us say there is a scheme on National Mission for Handicrafts. Now it seems like something that you would want to do to uplift the handicraft sector in the country, and the option would say providing technical support, infrastructural support, financial support. And in such a case, you would not remember it. But just think about it, that if you're building a handicraft sector, you would require technical support, you would require infrastructural support, you would also require financial support. So just mark all of them as correct. Unless you have very strong reasons to say no, this is not included in the scheme, or this is not an objective of the scheme, please don't worry about it. Okay. Data heavy topics have not been asked, so don't worry. Nobody asks data heavy topics in governance and polity for the pre. That's a misconception. Have a look at the past year papers. In the second document also, what I've also done is, listen to this carefully, I've also listed all the schemes and why and how and the context why they've been asked. If Atal Innovation Mission was asked last year, why was it asked, what was it asked, and stuff like that. Okay, so that should be it, and we should be done. Guys, thank you so much. It's so nice to see you guys, and